Now I'm scared, and this time it's for real, because this is changing everything. On the 20th of November 2024, a few days ago, there has been a missile attack on Ukrainian factory PA Pivdenmash, previously known as Yuzmash. This is a Ukrainian manufacturer of rockets and everything space, like satellites, engines, and so on. And its headquarters and production facility is in Dnipro. The factory has already been attacked in the past, and this attack has been a complex operation. The Russians launched 6 Kh-101 cruise missiles, 1 Kinzhal missile, and something new. In fact, at 5:17, this happened. Just after the attack, rumors started to bounce around on the internet. The Ukrainian claimed it was an ICBM, then the Pentagon said that it was actually an intermediate-range ballistic missile. But everything was clarified by a TV message from Putin in which he explained that this was a new system, a new intermediate-range ballistic missiles that had never been used before. And luckily he clearly specified that was armed with multiple conventional warheads. And having an intermediate-range ballistic missile armed with conventional warheads, it's new in itself, but we will get back to it. The new missile is the 9M729 Oreshnik. Why it's named so? Well, when I was a boy, my parents had a house with a large garden, and we had a hazelnut tree. It was nice to pick up the hazelnut in autumn, but in spring, the hazel has very peculiar flowers that look like this. And this is how the warheads of the new missile look. The Russians usually name their ballistic missiles after trees. I wouldn't be surprised if they named this one Oreshnik exactly for this reason. This is a brand new system never seen before. And Putin himself clarified that this was to be considered an operational test. The Pentagon maintains that this is a variant of the R-26 ICBM. I have reasons to think otherwise. Yuzmash was hit by 6 waves of 6 vehicles. Some of the waves look smaller, but it's likely the different perspective. In fact, we have different angles, and from different angles, they sort of look the same. At first, I thought it was a case of several missiles with multiple warheads, but then I came to realize that what we were seeing were actually 6 multiple independent re-entry vehicles, each one with 6 submunitions. A MIRV is a type of missile warhead that exists to give the missile the possibility of hitting multiple targets or concentrating several warheads, not just one, on a single target, like in this case. MIRVs are usually released at the apex of the missile trajectory by the missile bus, which is an assembly built on top of the final stage of the missile. It is capable of maneuvering in space and releasing the warheads in the direction of the target. Normally, with the warheads come decoys and false targets. These are there in case someone has an anti-ballistic system to obviously give the system many more targets to choose. These are generally small metallic radar reflector, either inflatable or not. But these decoys could also be active systems, and we know that the Russians actually use active decoys. The Skander features 6 active decoys that sort of mimic the missile, but we will get back to this. The interesting thing is that it is possible to release these MIRVs in a way that makes them follow different trajectories but hit the same target. And this is probably what happened in this attack. Moreover, in this case, it seems that each warhead deploys 6 submunitions, which means that this system has 36 warheads. As I said before, it could be slightly fewer, but probably not. Some commented that it was just an improvised intercontinental ballistic missile armed with test warheads, and these test warheads are generally light metal mass simulators that going through the atmosphere burn and get fragmented. So the number of hits that we were seeing was just due to this fragmentation. This is absolutely not the case. A free-falling warhead looks completely different. It is much slower, and you see a wake of burning material that separates. In this case, it's quite clear that these warheads have a pretty high ballistic coefficient. That is, they don't slow down much when entering the atmosphere. What really impressed me was to notice how compact each wave is and how the waves evenly distribute in the area to cover the target. Yuzmash is a large Soviet-style factory that covers an extremely large area which has been carpeted with these missiles. Maybe just one wave fell slightly off, but the accuracy seems to be really high. This is obviously not a precision attack weapon. This is an area saturation weapon, but still looks quite accurate. So probably these warheads are MIRVs, so they are capable of terminal guidance when they enter in the atmosphere, and to get this type of accuracy, a satellite navigation system is probably enough. According to what Putin said, the terminal velocity of these warheads was about Mach 10, which makes them technically hypersonic. From NATO sources, we heard that it was launched by a transporter erector launcher in Kapusty Yar, which is one of the various Russian missile test ranges, which is near Astrakhan. It is about 800 kilometers from Dnipro. If the missile flew a ballistic trajectory, our entry speed around Mach 10 is more or less right, probably a bit high, but not impossible. Kapusty Yar is near the Kazakh border. And from Kazakhstan, on social media have emerged pictures and videos of a missile glowing in the atmosphere in the sunlight at a time and with a direction that is very compatible with the missile that attacked Dnipro. It was just one missile. Now, you may have the impression that we know a fair amount of information about this weapon, but actually we have plenty of questions left. What exactly was it, this weapon? Why does such a weapon exist? Why was it used? And to hit what? Trying to find an answer to all this is not easy. The media had different takes about this story, so I had to resort to the sponsor of this video, Ground News. Ground News is a website and an app that gathers related articles from more than 50,000 sources around the world in one place, so you can compare how different outlets cover the same subject. Every story comes with a clear breakdown of the political bias, credibility, ownership, and then headlines of the sources reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. This story made waves, and as you can see, it has been covered by 244 sources, and the distribution is more or less even. Now, if you compare the titles from the left and the right, we see that the left is just giving the news. For example, the Korea Times says that Russia fired experimental ballistic missile at Ukraine. But if you look at the right, the focus is different. In fact, you see that the sources are focusing on the mass production of the new Oreshnik missile. For example, here, after striking Ukraine with the Oreshnik missile, Putin orders continued tests and serial production of the weapon. The political bias is always visible. Ground News is very important for my research since I try to be as factual and unbiased as I can about something that often is neither black nor white. Ground News is giving my viewers 50% off their Unlimited Access Vantage plan. This is their best deal of the year, and it will only be available for a limited time. If you're already a subscriber, you can send Ground News as a gift for 50% off too. So make sure you use my link. I think Ground News is doing an important work, and I hope you'll check them out. Please support the people who support me. Several Western sources maintain that this missile was a variant of the R-26. The US Department of Defense has surely seen the launch, and identifying an ICBM or a missile in general at the launch is possible from the trajectory, the burn time, the stage separation patterns, and so on. So they may have seen something that they didn't tell us. What I tend to believe is that shortly before the launch, on Russian social media appeared some pictures of an R-26 being transported on road. And this probably fueled some rumors, and the rumors became the official version. The fact that it was launched by a TEL comes from the Pentagon, so it is absolutely possible that shortly after the launch, they zoomed into the launch location and they saw the TEL going away. However, as I said, I'm not convinced. In fact, Putin, in a different occasion the day after, wanted to specify that the Oreshnik is not an old Soviet system that has been modified, but something completely developed during Russian times. So, my conjecture is that this weapon is a derivation of the Bulava R-30 missile. The Bulava R-30 is an SLBM, that is a submarine-launched ballistic missile launched by the Russian submarines. It can carry between 6 and 10 nuclear warheads, around 100-150 kilotons. With the maximum throw weight, it has a range of 8,800 kilometers, and it has been entirely developed after the fall of the Soviet Union. And for a nuclear ballistic missile, it is decently accurate. For a ground-launched intermediate-range ballistic missile, it would probably make more sense to be developed from such a platform. In fact, the missile is quite compact. It has 2 meters in diameter, and it is about 12 meters long, which is, it's not small, but it's surely easier to move around than something that is around 20 meters long. The first 2 stages are solid fuel, which is handy. The third stage is liquid fuel because it used to maneuver the bus. Moreover, there are rumors that the R-30 features sub-munitions, which in that case are used more as decoys. So this new weapon could be an evolution of the R-30 bus. Moreover, in Ukrainian social media have emerged some pictures of missile components that from the existing procurement records have been associated with the Bulava. Not just the Bulava, also with other missiles, but it was a component built particularly for the Bulava. Moreover, the Bulava is still operational. It is actually quite new. I think that the full operational capability was reached in 2018. So if you are building a new system, that's probably a viable platform even from the production point of view. And by the way, Putin announced that after this test, they are starting the serial production. Furthermore, the pictures and the videos of the missile launch seems to suggest that the missile trajectory was relatively flat. It wasn't purely ballistic, and we know that the Bulava actually flies this type of trajectory to make the interception more difficult. As I said, I may be wrong, it is just a conjecture, but it makes sense to me. Let me know what do you think in the comments below. So, we have seen up to 36 warheads, but no explosions. To be fair, you can't really exclude that some of these warheads are actually penetrators that go underground and then explode underground. Very little explosion plume outside. This would sort of make sense because the large Soviet factories are known to have tunnels. So if you want to hit them, a penetrator like this could be useful. We have no elements to confirm this, so from now on I'm assuming that these are 36 kinetic warheads. Some of the comments that I've seen around say, well, what's the point? They don't even explode. Let's assume that each warhead is about 100 kilos, which for a big missile, it's relatively on the light side. However, 36 warheads are quite heavy, is 3.6 metric tons. The current Bulava estimated throw weight is about 1100. As a very broad rule of thumb, if you double the payload of a ballistic missile, you reduce the range of about 40%. This is extremely rough. What you should really do is just make a simulation, integrate in the motion equations and see what happens. If I did that, this video probably would have taken a month to do. Considering that a system with 36 warheads will probably have a relatively complex bus, and probably there's also some other stuff there, probably decoys, we can estimate that the payload of this system is 4.5 tons, 4,500 kilos, seems reasonable. And if we apply that to a Bulava, we get a range of 1,700 kilometers, totally compatible with what we have seen. Anyway, this may seem unreasonable because what could 36 heavy pieces of metal do to a large factory or a port facility, an airbase, and so on? Surely is not much damage. Well, the idea of using just kinetic attacks is not new, but I'm not going down that rabbit hole. I just invite you to consider that a Mark 84 bomb, which is a decently powerful weapon, I'm sure you will agree, develops an energy of about 209 to 110 megajoules. The kinetic energy of a 100 kilos warhead falling from the sky at 3,000 meters per second, which is roughly Mach 10, is about 450 megajoules. It is more than twice the energy developed by a Mark 84. Surely one explodes and the other doesn't, so the type of damage that you can see is probably going to be different, but it's not going to be small. They're not like small meteorites. With 36 warheads, the Oreshnik can hit a higher target with the equivalent of 77 Mark 84. To put this in context, this is almost twice the max payload of a B-52. And a warhead falling at Mach 10, even if it doesn't maneuver much, is surely beyond the engagement parameters of the Patriot or the Aster 30. Maybe, if the system is used to attack specifically the Patriot battery or the Aster battery, then they can hit some of the warheads, but otherwise I really doubt that they can protect anything that is more than a few kilometers far from the battery, if they can, because that's not a given. However, this missile is surely within the interception parameter of the SM-3 and the THAAD. But with 36 warheads and probably some more decoys, you just need one to deplete all the interceptors of a battery and then launch a second missiles that will hit the target. And as I said before, we know that the Russians have very sophisticated active decoys that are already using with ballistic missiles, so I wouldn't be surprised to see some even in this case. In a recent video inspired by the events in the Middle East and the growing tension in the Western Pacific, we discussed how many ballistic missiles may be necessary to disable a large airbase. We discussed a scenario in which Misawa, a US Air Force base in Japan, comes under attack from the Chinese. It was an interesting video and I suggest you to have a look. However, the result of that analysis was that you may need well over 100 missiles to disable a large airbase like Misawa, for example. And you need that many even if the base is not protected by anti-ballistic systems. Large airbases are hard and big targets with simply a lot of things to hit. And if the base is defended, you may need twice as many missiles because the first wave will be needed to deplete the defending battery and the second wave will do the job. So, in the light of this consideration, do you realize what the Russians have just done? The Russians have just reduced these few hundreds of missiles to 4 or 5. Your only hope in this case is to hit the missile before it releases the submunition, which is something that the SM-3 might be capable of doing, but surely is beyond the THAAD capability. Now, do you realize that a couple of hundred of these Oreshnik could ground all the NATO air forces in Europe? And if the bases were defended, do you realize that you need at least a THAAD battery for every air base? How much is going to cost? And more importantly, how long is going to take to build all these launchers, interceptors, radars, and so on? And if this scenario happens, Do you realize that the NATO forces, without the possibility of establishing air superiority and air dominance, lose most, if not all, of their edge? Do you realize that the same type of weapon quite soon could be in Chinese hands, or could be given to the North Koreans, or to the Iranians, and so on? What the Russians just did is a textbook asymmetric reply, which is what their doctrine actually predicates that they should do. And with the deployment of a single system like this, they have just changed the game. And if this wasn't scary enough, there is another element you should be scared of. This time the Russians notified the Americans of the launch, because normally an intermediate-range ballistic missile doesn't have conventional warheads. And you have no way of telling if a missile being launched is either nuclear or conventional. So every time one of these weapons is launched, there is the possibility that by mistake, a nuclear retaliation is going to happen. The Americans are planning to deploy hypersonic weapons in Germany from 2026, potentially armed with nuclear warheads as well. The flight time of these systems is a few minutes. You don't have time to sit down and assess the situation. These are extremely, extremely dangerous. A commander with slightly shaky hands could initiate unwittingly a nuclear holocaust. Now, to be fair, Putin said that if they're going to use these weapons, again, they will notify in advance to let eventually civilians evacuate the area. If they do so, it's an extra level of safety, but nobody's forcing them to do so. They may choose to launch a surprise attack. And considering that, again, Putin explicitly said that the use of this weapon is a retaliation for the recent permission that was given to Ukraine to use long-range weapons inside Russia, I wouldn't be surprised if the Russians used the Oreshnik to go after some target outside Ukraine. Think, for example, of Akrotiri in Cyprus. It is a British base, and the British have given the Ukrainian permission to use the Storm Shadow on Russian territory. And from the news that we have, they are also working better than the American ATACMS. Another possible target is Feteshti, the airbase in Romania, where the Ukrainian F-16 pilots are being trained. Another potential targets are the US Army depot in Poland. There are several. Do you understand why I'm scared now? So, thank you very much for watching this rather grim video. Sorry, just a minute before saying goodbye. Apologies, this video has been put together quite quickly in quite strange conditions. There's another consideration that I would like to do. So, if the Russians used this new system against this factory, what were the Ukrainians doing there? It could be interesting to know. We know that Ukrainians do have a ballistic missile program. Maybe it was happening there. Anyway, another thing that I forgot to do is to say thank you to some people. First, to my friend Andrea Gaspardo, who gave me a lot of very interesting ideas. To Wyatt from DPA, who put together the original core of information about all this story. And the guys on the Discord server that do an exceptional job finding very obscure and strange pieces of documentations around the internet. Please accept my sincere thank you. A big thank you to all those who are supporting the channel on Patreon or by being a member or by any other of the means that are available. And by the way, today there's also a GoFundMe, which is connected to a long-term project that I'm doing. I'm trying to write a book. If you're interested, there will be links in the description below and on screen. If you can support the channel financially, which is perfectly fine, do it only if you can. Please just subscribe, because more than half of the people who watch my videos are not subscribed, which is strange. But also hit like, hit the bell, so you will receive notifications when a new video goes live. This is it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.